becoming a better woman. How dare you? Well, I'm glad you asked. My purpose is to liberate love through connection and playfulness. And I believe that the gender war that many people are having to be very destructive. I believe that everyone benefits when men become better men and women become better women. Enjoy this interview. Linesa, welcome to The Vibrant Couple. I'm really excited to talk with you about your two marriages and what you learn how to be yourself through those marriages.
For having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Wonderful. And so you've been married twice.
I have been married twice, yes.
How old were you when you first got married?
My first husband was my high school sweetheart, and so we had been together since we were 15. Yeah, and got
Wow.
married right after high school. And he went to the military, and then we had two children shortly after we were married. And yeah, from high school to marriage to having the kids, we were married for 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was he deployed much of that time?
He was deployed most of the time. So like eight
Oh,
months out of the year,
oh,
he was gone.
that
Uh,
must have been really difficult.
it was extremely difficult, especially with the two kids, and I felt like I was raising the kids alone.
Yeah.
Um, and then from Texas, and he was stationed in Florida, and he wanted me to come move to Florida, but it didn't make sense to me because I had no support system there. And I'm like, you're not here. It would be different if you were here. But why would I leave Florida with our family is here in Texas? That's our support system. So, um, that became an issue also, the distance in the marriage.
And so you were in your mid 20s, early 20s when you,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 And so how long before, oh, how old were you when you got married a second time?
Um, I met my second husband while I was going through my divorce with my first husband. Um, and we dated off and on for 4 or 5 years. Um, and finally, I had to think back, maybe about 7, 8 years after the first marriage, we got married.
How long did you stay married the second time?
7 years, something about
7 years as well.
7 years as well. Yeah,
S- So if I somehow count well, you were around 40 when you got divorced the second time.
I was. I was.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 41. And
Okay.
um, I moved when we separated. I decided to move. I kind of picked a spot on the map, ended up in Washington, just kind of moved across country, and I had to be here 6 months to get the residency before I was able to file for divorce. Yeah.
And so the reason I'm doing the math on your age is the belief I have is we are just beginning to know who we are around age 40. And then it gets much
Exactly.
better at 50 and then even better at 60.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I heard from you that you somehow were your wife you thought you were expected to be.
Exactly. So in both marriages, I grew up Southern Baptist Church in the Bible Belt, and you have these expectations, these rules, spoken and unspoken. Um, and it was very strange for me to even carry that because I grew up in a family that did not necessarily play into those traditional gender roles. All the men in my family cook. They're great cooks. All the men in my family, my dad did. I went grocery shopping with my dad. I went grocery shopping with my dad. My dad did most of the cooking. My dad was at PTA meetings, and so were my uncles. So I didn't grow up with those traditionals, the woman is this and the man is this. But I think because A, I had such a deep mother womb, and mother wounds are those are very difficult wounds to navigate. My mother was absent, my biological mother. And I grew up with this kind of void of who I was, except for this child who felt rejected by her own mother. So the love that I found, and I think the reason I even got with my first husband was I we had kind of a shared wound. And so I had no clue of who I was. And so this persona that I created was okay, well, the religion says and society says a wife is this. She should, do the, run the home. She should be self-sacrificing. And then that's something else that we kind of grow up with as women is we take care of everyone. We're taught to take care of everyone and be self-sacrificing for everything except for taking care of ourselves. Ourselves are always last. And it was a workshop I attended, and I realized this many years later, and after the divorces. It was a workshop I attended um, from Brené Brown, Dare to Lead. And she did a lot of research, and the talk was about vulnerability. And one thing I learned was that I had showed up in every relationship that I had been in very armored. Armored. I had this armor around me, from my trauma, from wounds, from just not knowing who I was. And I realized I went through two marriages and they had no idea who they were married to because I had no idea who I was. There was just this person mimicking what I thought was I was supposed to be, you know. So that reality hit me really, really hard. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know who I was. They had no idea who I was. And I was miserable when I was married. I hated being married. Um, again, because I felt like I had to do everything. I was a mom, I was working, I was going to school. And I remember several times coming home from going to school in the evening, coming home at night at 10 o'clock, and my husband would say, "What are we having for dinner?" And I'm just exhausted. But I would go at 10 o'clock at night in the kitchen and cook because this, you know, person. And so you become resentful for having to do everything and carry everything instead of me being secure in who I was and saying, you know what, no, this is not how I want life to be. I want a partner. I don't want a third child to take care of. I don't want, these things. So I hated being married. But I think I take ownership and accountability for that because I didn't know how to show up in a marriage or a relationship as, you know what, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is who I am, and this is who you're gonna get, so
Totally, totally get it. And so you are not the only one by far. And that's partly why I have this new series, Becoming a Better Woman, and not necessarily from a woman, next wife material, but more about becoming who you are. So what have you done to somehow get to know who you are, learn to operate your own life from your own sovereignty?
well, as you mentioned, it's something about when you get into your 40s, going into that point, you kind of figure out what you don't like, what you don't want, and you really start to discover who you are. And the truth of the matter is, if you are paying attention and you're living life, you can look back at your life a year ago and see, I'm not the same person I was last year, let alone 10, 20 years ago. So the more, and especially when you're committed to being a lifelong learner, when you are constantly trying to be a better version of yourself. And that's what any adversity puts you through. It introduces you to a greater version of yourself. Um, and then so there was just that natural progression, but then there was also the desire to heal, to heal wounds, because you heal yourself, you heal your children and your grandchildren and those, going forth. So in my line of work, I am a mental health counselor. There is, before you even are accepted into a therapist or psychologist program, you are vetted for, because it requires you to do some intense work on yourself. Um, so even going through the process of educating myself required a great deal of inner work and reflection, in that discovering who I am really empowered me. But I think the biggest tool that gave me that empowerment of discovery was just kind of moving across the country, closing my eyes, picking a spot on the map, and moving away and separating myself from everything. I remember having a conversation with my uncle before I left, because, of course, everyone thinks you're crazy moving away from everyone and where you know no one and hadn't visited before. And I remember my uncle asking me, "What are you running away from?" And I told him, I said, "I'm not running away, I'm running to. I'm running to something. I'm running to myself, and discovering who I am." And so doing that kind of introduced me to myself. It introduced me to a strength that I was not aware that I had. And through that process, that is where the real growth began, in the real journey of healing kind of began. Um, but here we are looking at 10 years. This has been a 10-year process, and still going. And then the discovery of just wearing that shield and letting it go and being able to drop it. And in dropping that shield, I was also able to get into this self appreciation and a self love, because you can't share your authentic self with anyone if you don't fall in love with yourself first, you know. So it's been a journey, and the journey still continues, but that's how it started. That's how
Wonderful.
you know.
I can really resonate because I also moved to Seattle, leaving everything. And,
Yeah,
for me, it was slightly further away from Paris. And it was slightly longer because it was 32 years ago.
yeah.
But I'm definitely found myself, I find my freedom, and I was able to let go of a lot of trauma and a lot of the shields. So
Hmm.
kudos to you for doing it. That's very
Exactly.
courageous.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
now I'm on a path of wanting other people to have that self-love, and be on that journey and kind of do that for themselves. And when you can do that, you can love other people better.
I
You become
agree.
much better at sharing love when you have it for yourself.
Hmm. And so, would you get married again?
Marriage is not a requirement for me. Um, Even when I think about the institution of marriage now, I don't want ownership. I want partnership. Um, I don't want to have to give up who I am. For example, a woman gets married, she gives up her name. I didn't earn my degrees in anyone else's name. I earned them in my name. I don't want to have to give up who I am in order to love you, no more than I would want that person to give up who they are in order to be with me. Um, I would rather be in a situation where we know, you know what, I'm here because I choose to be every day, not because this legal document is holding me here, not because anything else other than me saying, I choose to be here. You know, no matter what you're going through, I choose to be here. So to me, that is more impactful than I need to be your wife or I need to have this title. You know, again, I don't want the ownership, I want the partnership. So if that's there and very clear that it's there, I don't need the marriage. But if it were important to my partner, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But those things have to be in place more than
Totally
anything.
get it.
Yeah.
Totally get it. And
Hmm.
so there are men and women listen to this video right now, and hopefully they're inspired with what you're sharing. What would be the one thing that you would recommend, both to men and women, so that in their marriage or in the marriage of their children, somehow that, wifey material syndrome, gets worked on?
Twofold. One, when you decide to get with someone and you say, okay, I want to spend my life with this person, the biggest question I would have first is what's your plan? What's the goal? What are you working towards? I think what having that in mind helps you build a stronger foundation because you know we have a plan here. You know, we have a goal. And I think one of the questions I ask many couples when I ask them, what's the plan? What's your goal? They can't answer that. You know, they know, oh, we love each other and we just want to, okay, so what are you going to do on the days you don't feel so in love? You know, because you're not going to always feel that. So I think just having a clear picture of what you are working towards, what are you trying to build together, I think gives you a stronger foundation.
What I'm hearing is that the good days, the bad days, and then not just the goals, but also the day-to-day experience of each other,
Hmm.
and how will you conflict and fight with each other?
Yeah, yeah. What are we doing here? And then making sure that you design your relationship based upon what works for the two of you, not what works for society, not what works for the church, not what works for, you know, what's in the unwritten rule book of men or women, but what works for you. You know, what would make it harmonious in your home? You know, would living together work for you? Would living in separate houses work for you? Would, you know, and not get caught up on the gender thing, you know, but get caught up on, you know what, this is what I am good at. This is where I am strongest. This is where you are strongest, and make that work regardless of what gender is attached to it or what title is attached to it. I think if you stay true to that, you have a better outcome. You design your relationship in the way that what works for you too.
Two individuals, each working on becoming a better themselves, and then
Hmm.
together working on a better together.
Yes, I like the saying, you know what, I will work on me for you if you work on you for me, you know. So
Please say that again.
I will work on me for you if you will work on you for me. Meaning, I'm going to work on being the best version of myself I could possibly be if you work on being the best version of yourself that you could possibly be. And let's present that to each other. Let's present the best possible versions of ourselves that we can be to each other.
That's
And so
beautiful.
that means if I'm taking full responsibility of my happiness and you are taking full responsibility of your happiness, then that means that we're just going to share happiness. We're not putting the weight or the burden of being responsible for each other's happiness. You know, we're just two people being responsible for our own happiness and sharing that with each other, you know.
I love it. And so I have one more question. So let's pretend that a young woman is watching this video right now and she basically has been married. Let's pretend for a year and a half, time when, honeymoon has rubbed off and she's not happy in her marriage, which somehow is normal. No
Mhm.
one is fully happy all the time, and no marriage is perfect. And, no partner, whether, husband or whatever gender or, sexual orientation is perfect. And so let's pretend that a young person unhappy with their partner right now in their married life or their together life, would you recommend they get out right away? Or would you recommend they hang in there a little longer until they somehow fully understand what is going on, what is not working, and then get out if it's not working?
Well, unless there is, you know, abuse going on, I would never recommend anyone leave um, a situation. That is a very personal choice. What I would recommend is is this something that can be fixed? Is it something that can be reinvented? Because again, remember, I can go back a year from now, 2 years from now, and say, I'm not the same person. So, a relationship, a marriage requires reintroducing yourself to your partner. And it could be something as simple as you need to reintroduce yourself to each other, you know, because you've changed. And then you recreate what your marriage needs to look like from who you are at this point. And that's, I think, a lot of couples forget to do that. They forget to reintroduce themselves to their partner. And you look up and you have a stranger next to you. So it gets started as simply as reintroduce yourself.
Linisa, I really enjoyed our conversation and I commend you for all the work you've done on yourself to basically grow and becoming a better person.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate being able to talk and share. And hopefully, we're all working on just being better humans.
I agree, and I'm hoping that many see this video because we just had a conversation that we should have a lot more, in my view.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This was fun.
If this conversation I just had with Linisa inspired you to become a better man or a better woman, please hit the like button below and subscribe so you can be notified when I publish new juicy content. And please pass along to all you believe would benefit. I look forward to seeing you very soon.